300 guests watched Jelani roll Zainab's empty wheelchair onto the stage and crown his mistress queen of the night. What none of them knew, not Jelani, not his mother, not the woman wearing Zainab's stolen pearls, was that the hospital where Zainab lay recovering owned every building on that block, including this one. The rooftop was golden. Every corner of that luxury event space had been draped in black and gold fabric, hundreds of candles flickering on every table, a live jazz band playing soft and low in the corner, like they were scoring a movie no one knew was being filmed. 300 guests filled the room, colleagues from Jelani's marketing firm, family friends who had known the couple for years, church members who brought covered dishes to hospital rooms, neighbors who waved from driveways on Sunday mornings, all dressed to the nines, all believing they had come to honor something real. Giant screens lined the walls showing a slideshow of photographs, smiling faces, warm moments, graduation pictures, holiday dinners. But if you looked carefully, if you really paid attention, if you studied every single frame that cycled across those screens, you would notice something that should have broken the spell immediately. Not a single photograph included Zainab. Jelani stood at the center of it all, tall, handsome, clean-shaven in a tailored black suit with a gold pocket square that matched the decor he had personally chosen. He moved through the crowd like a man who had rehearsed his grief in the mirror that morning, shaking hands with the firm grip of someone who wanted you to feel his strength, accepting hugs and holding them just long enough to seem wounded, nodding slowly like a man carrying a noble burden that only he could understand. His mother, Lorraine, stood near the front row in a cream-colored dress she had bought on credit that same week, dabbing her dry eyes with a silk handkerchief, playing the role of the suffering mother-in-law so convincingly that even the pastor's wife reached over and rubbed her back. Then Jelani took the microphone. The room settled like a congregation before a sermon. He cleared his throat and began speaking in a low, measured voice about sacrifice, about how the past year had tested him in ways no man should ever be tested, about how he had carried his family through darkness and through hospitals and through sleepless nights and through prayers that felt like they hit the ceiling and fell right back down. He talked about loneliness, about watching the woman you love disappear into illness, about standing strong when the world gives you every reason to collapse. The crowd nodded. Women wiped their eyes. Men put their hands on their wives' shoulders. A woman in the second row leaned to her friend and whispered, "That man is a soldier." Then he did something that made the entire room hold its breath. He walked to the side of the stage and rolled out a wheelchair. Not just any wheelchair, Zainab's wheelchair. The same one she used every single day. The same one with the worn armrests and the small leather pouch on the left side, where she kept her grandmother's letter folded in quarters. He positioned it center stage under a single golden spotlight and bowed his head like a man standing over a grave. "My wife is in the hospital tonight," he said, his voice cracking just enough to sound believable, but not enough to ruin his composure. "She's fighting her battle. She's fighting it alone right now because that's the kind of woman she is. And I ask all of you, every single person in this room, to bow your heads with me and send her your prayers." 300 heads bowed. The room went completely silent. Someone in the back began to hum a hymn, slow, mournful, the kind of hum that vibrates in your chest. It lasted about 30 seconds, and then the music changed. The jazz band kicked into something upbeat, something celebratory, something that had no business following a prayer. Jelani's face shifted like a mask being removed. The grief melted off like stage makeup under hot lights. He grinned, wide, bright, almost hungry, and said into the microphone, "But tonight we celebrate the woman who kept me standing when I couldn't stand on my own." A side door opened. Out walked Tiffany. 6 feet of manufactured confidence in a custom red gown, that hugged every curve like it had been painted on, hair swept to one side in loose waves, heels clicking against the stage floor like a countdown to something explosive. And around her neck, catching every light in the room, glowing like they knew they were stolen, hung a pearl necklace, Zainab's grandmother's pearls, the ones Nell had placed around Zainab's neck on graduation day with trembling hands and steady eyes, the ones that carried the weight of 4 generations of black women who survived things that should have destroyed them. Lorraine had taken those pearls that very morning from Zainab's hospital nightstand while pretending to fluff her pillows and adjust her water cup. Lorraine climbed the stage steps and pinned a gold corsage on Tiffany's dress like she was crowning a daughter-in-law. Jelani pulled Tiffany close, wrapped his arm around her waist, and kissed her in front of every person in that room. The crowd erupted, applause, whistles, standing ovations, champagne glasses raised. Lorraine leaned into a woman beside her and whispered with a smile that could curdle milk, "That crippled girl was never enough for my son. This one right here. This is the upgrade." 6 floors below that golden rooftop, in the medical complex connected to the very same building, in a room so quiet you could hear the IV drip counting seconds, Zainab lay in a hospital bed. Monitors beeped in steady rhythm. Fluorescent light hummed above her. A thin blanket covered her legs. Legs that had not moved on their own in 10 years. A nurse came in, adjusted her pillow, and asked if she needed anything. Zainab shook her head slowly, her eyes fixed on the ceiling like she was reading something written there that no one else could see. She already knew about the party. Her assistant Cole had found the invitation tucked inside Jelani's jacket pocket and showed it to her that morning. She had stared at it for a very long time. Then she closed her eyes and said nothing. She did not cry. She did not curse. She just breathed. What nobody on that rooftop knew, not Jelani in his tailored suit, not Lorraine in her borrowed elegance, not Tiffany in her stolen pearls, not a single one of those 300 applauding guests, was that Zainab owned that hospital. She had founded and built MedBridge Health Systems from her wheelchair, growing it from a single software license into one of the largest black-owned healthcare technology companies in American history. She owned the building the party was happening in. She owned the security system whose cameras were recording every stolen kiss, every raised glass, every whispered insult. Her company had contracts in 43 states and 7 countries. Her net worth sat quietly, modestly, almost impossibly at $72 billion. And she had built every single penny of it, while her husband believed she was collecting disability checks and doing nothing on her laptop. 12 years before that golden rooftop, before the betrayal and the pearls and the wheelchair used as a stage prop, there was a small brick house in Annapolis, Maryland, the kind of house with a porch that creaked when you stepped on the 3rd plank, a kitchen that always smelled like cinnamon and bay leaves, and a backyard garden where roses grew stubborn and beautiful no matter the season. That was where Zainab grew up, raised by her grandmother Nell after her parents passed in a house fire when she was only 4 years old. Nell was the kind of woman whose presence could fill a room without raising her voice. She ironed her church clothes on Saturday night. She had scripture written in blue ink and taped to the bathroom mirror. She worked 31 years at a linen factory on the east side of town, never once complained about the hours or the pay, never missed a single shift, and saved every spare dollar in a coffee tin under the kitchen sink so Zainab could go to college. She used to stand at the stove making cornbread and say, without looking up, "The world will try to make you small, baby. Don't you let it. You were born to take up space." Zainab was quiet by nature but brilliant by design. She read encyclopedias for fun when other kids were watching cartoons. She fixed the neighbor's VCR when she was 9. She built her first website at 13. She graduated top of her class at Howard University with a degree in biomedical engineering And when she walked across that stage in her cap and gown, Nell sat in the third row, hands folded in her lap, too proud to cry but too full not to let one tear escape down her right cheek. After the ceremony, Nell pulled Zainab to the side of the auditorium, away from the noise and the camera flashes, and reached into her worn leather purse. She pulled out a pearl necklace. The pearls were not new. They were not expensive by any jeweler's standard. Some were slightly uneven. One had a tiny chip near the clasp, but those pearls had survived more than most diamonds ever would. These pearls were on your great-grandmother's neck while she picked cotton in Carolina, Nell said, her voice barely above a whisper but steady as stone. She held them like prayer beads, like something sacred. They survived her hands. They survived your grandmother's tears. They survived mine. Now they belong to you. Wear them when you need to remember who you are and where you come from. Zainab met Jelani at a community fundraiser that same summer. He was magnetic in the way that certain men are. Tall, well-spoken, dressed like he was going somewhere important even when he was just standing still. He worked in marketing at a mid-size firm, talked about launching his own agency someday, quoted business books he had half read with the confidence of someone who had written them, and he made Zainab laugh in a way she had not laughed since childhood. She fell in love fast and hard, the way young women do when a man makes them feel seen for the first time. Nell saw it differently. One warm evening, sitting on the porch, watching Jelani's taillights disappear down the street after dinner, Nell rocked in her chair and said quietly, not to Zainab, but to the air itself, "That man talks about what he wants to be. You already are what he's chasing." Zainab smiled and kissed her grandmother's forehead, thinking it was just the worry of an old woman who had been alone too long. She did not understand then what Nell could see from 60 years of watching men who wore ambition like cologne but never did the laundry. They married the following spring in a small ceremony at the community center. Nell sat front row in her best dress. Zainab wore the pearls. Jelani looked like a man who had won something. They moved into a modest two-bedroom apartment in Baltimore where the radiator clanked at night and the neighbor's dog barked at shadows. Zainab set up her second-hand laptop on the kitchen table and began coding. She had a vision, a platform that could connect rural hospitals with specialists through AI-driven diagnostics, bridging the gap between underserved communities and life-saving expertise. She worked 18-hour days, sometimes forgetting to eat, always forgetting to sleep, her fingers moving across the keyboard like she was writing a letter to the future. Jelani would come home from work, glance at the laptop, drop his keys on the counter and say, "You're always on that thing. What are you even doing?" He never waited for the answer, not once. 2 years into the marriage, Zainab was driving home from a medical technology conference in Virginia when a delivery truck ran a red light at an intersection just outside the city. The impact crushed the entire driver's side of the car. She was trapped for 40 minutes before rescue workers cut her free. She was in surgery for 9 hours. When she woke up in a room that smelled like disinfectant and grief, the doctors told her the spinal damage was severe, irreversible. She might never walk again. She was 24 years old, married for 2 years, and the world had just been cut in half beneath her. Jelani cried at her bedside that first night, held her hand with both of his, told her he would never leave, that they would fight this together, that she was the strongest woman he had ever known. Then he disappeared for 2 weeks. When he finally came back, he smelled like a different apartment and unfamiliar soap, and he could not look her in the eye. Lorraine called the hospital room 3 days later, while Zainab was still learning how to sit up without help. She spoke to Jelani, but her voice was loud enough to carry through the phone speaker and land right in Zainab's lap. "You didn't sign up for this, baby. No man should be chained to a broken woman. God wouldn't want that for you." But Zainab did not break. Something inside her, something Nell had planted years ago with cornbread prayers and porch swing sermons, something quiet and stubborn and rooted deeper than any injury could reach, refused to collapse. From her wheelchair in that small apartment with the clanking radiator, she finished her software. She filed 3 patents in 6 months. She pitched her platform to a regional hospital system, presenting from her wheelchair over a video call because she could not afford to travel, and they said yes. Then another hospital said yes. Then 12 more across 3 states. Revenue climbed. Then it soared. She registered everything under her maiden name through a network of holding companies that Cole, her childhood friend from Annapolis who had become her assistant, her protector, her accountant, her only true confidant in the world, helped her build and manage from a small office they rented above a barber shop. She never told Jelani, not because she wanted to hide it, not because she was playing some long game, but because he never asked. In 10 years of marriage, through every late night and every new contract and every milestone that would have made any husband proud, Jelani never once sat down across from his wife, looked her in the eye, and said, "What are you working on?" Not once, and Zainab stopped waiting for him to ask. Nell passed away on a Tuesday morning in October, peaceful in her sleep, in that same brick house in Annapolis with the creaking porch and the roses in the garden. Zainab held the pearl necklace to her chest for a long time. Then she opened the small jewelry box on Nell's dresser and found a letter folded inside. The handwriting was shaky but legible, written in the blue ink Nell always used. "When the storm passes, you'll still be standing, even if you're sitting down." Zainab folded that letter and placed it in the pouch on the side of her wheelchair. It stayed there every day, through every meeting, through every betrayal, through every night she spent alone in a house full of silence. The years moved forward the way years do when you stop counting them by happiness and start counting them by survival. Zainab's empire grew quietly, methodically, like a vine climbing a wall no one was watching. While Jelani believed they were living on his mid-level marketing salary and what he assumed were government disability checks, Zainab was acquiring hospitals across the eastern seaboard. She was funding artificial intelligence health startups. She was sitting in boardrooms via secure video link, making decisions that affected millions of patients, while her husband was in the next room watching sports highlights and complaining about the cable bill. MedBridge Health Systems became a giant. Fortune magazine profiled the company under the headline, "The Invisible Billionaire," because no one in the public sphere could identify the reclusive founder who had built a $72 billion healthcare empire without ever appearing on a red carpet or giving a television interview. Zainab read that headline from her wheelchair, in a hospital room she owned, in a building her company had constructed, and she smiled to herself, because invisible was exactly what she had always been, to the people who were supposed to love her most. Jelani met Tiffany at a marketing conference in Atlanta. She was everything Zainab was not, and she made sure you knew it within 30 seconds of meeting her. Loud where Zainab was quiet, flashy where Zainab was modest, she wore designer labels she could not afford and posted photographs of other people's luxury vacations as if they were her own. She spoke about herself in the third person like she was narrating her own documentary, and she saw Jelani not as a man to love but as a man to use. A man with a disabled wife at home was a man carrying guilt, and guilt, Tiffany knew from experience, made men generous with their time, their money, and their loyalty. The affair started fast and ugly. Within weeks, Tiffany moved into an apartment Jelani was paying for with money he skimmed from the household account, an account that, unknown to him, was quietly funded by Zainab's holding companies. He was spending his wife's money to house the woman he was replacing her with, and the irony was so sharp it could have drawn blood. Lorraine did not just tolerate the affair. She celebrated it like it was the answer to a prayer she had been whispering for years. She visited Tiffany's apartment on weekday afternoons, bringing casserole dishes and church fans and unsolicited advice about how to keep Jelani satisfied. She sat at Tiffany's kitchen table like a woman who had finally found the daughter-in-law she deserved, and told Jelani over Sunday dinners, "Tiffany is the kind of woman who can give me grandchildren. She can stand beside you, not that wheelchair, not that burden. You deserve a woman who can stand next to you, not one who sits behind you." Jelani began staying out later, coming home at hours that no longer required explanation because the explanations had stopped being asked for. He smelled like Tiffany's perfume and did not bother to shower before climbing into bed next to his wife. He stopped helping Zainab with basic daily tasks, the morning transfer from bed to wheelchair, reaching items on high shelves, picking up her medication from the pharmacy. One Tuesday night, well past midnight, Zainab tried to get from her wheelchair to the bathroom on her own. The front wheel caught on the edge of a throw rug, and the chair tipped. She fell hard. Her shoulder hit the tile floor first, then her head, a sharp crack, then silence. She lay there for 40 minutes, staring at the ceiling, not crying, not calling for help, just breathing through the pain and the loneliness and the absurdity of lying on a cold floor in a house she could buy 1,000 times over. Cole found her after a missed check-in call. He let himself in with his key, found her on the bathroom floor, and lifted her back into her chair without saying a word. His hands were shaking. His eyes were red. "Leave him," Cole said, and it was not a suggestion. It was a plea. "You have more money than that man will see in 10 lifetimes. You have a company that is changing the world. You have everything. Why are you still here?" Zainab looked at him with eyes that were tired but not empty. Then she said quietly, almost to herself, "He'll see the truth when it's time." Lorraine was not satisfied with simply supporting the affair. She wanted Zainab gone, erased, removed from the family like a stain from a tablecloth. She began calling relatives across 3 states, telling anyone who would listen that Zainab was mentally unstable, depressed, delusional. She said Zainab talked to herself, refused medication, and was becoming a danger to herself and to Jelani. She wanted power of attorney. She wanted legal control over the woman whose company could buy every house on Lorraine's block and still have change left over. A lawyer took the case, began pulling asset records as part of standard due diligence, and what he found on his screen made him put down his coffee and read it 3 times. Then he called Cole. Cole made 1 phone call to Medbridge Legal. The filing was killed within 48 hours. No record, no trace, just silence. Tiffany pushed harder. She was tired of being the secret. She wanted Jelani to file for divorce, to make it loud and public, to cut Zainab loose like dead weight. Jelani hesitated, not because he still loved Zainab. Whatever love he once had for her had dried up long ago, but because he worried about the optics, leaving a wife in a wheelchair, the judgment, the church whispers, the social media storm. He could not afford to look like the villain, even though he already was one. Tiffany sat across from him one evening, wine in hand, legs crossed, and said with the kind of calm that comes from calculation, "Then throw a party, invite everyone. Show the world you've moved on. Make it a celebration. Make it your rebirth. Let them see the new you." That conversation became the rooftop event. Jelani planned it for 3 weeks, 300 guests, black and gold theme, a slideshow of his life carefully edited by Lorraine to erase Zainab from every single frame. Tiffany picked the menu, the music, and her own gown. And on the morning of the party, while Zainab was in the hospital, recovering from her 3rd spinal procedure in 2 years, Lorraine walked into her room carrying a vase of yellow flowers and a smile that would make the devil uncomfortable. She set the flowers on the windowsill, made small talk about the weather and the nurses and the food, and when Zainab closed her eyes from the haze of pain medication, Lorraine opened the nightstand drawer, lifted out the pearl necklace with 2 fingers like she was picking up something dirty, and slipped it into her purse. That evening, in a dressing room behind the rooftop stage, she draped those pearls around Tiffany's neck and said, "Welcome to the family, baby." Zainab discovered the pearls were gone during Cole's evening visit. She reached into the nightstand drawer the way she did every single night, just to touch them, just to feel Nell's hands, just to remember she came from somewhere strong, and found it empty. Her fingers searched the drawer twice, 3 times. Then her hand went still. She did not scream, she did not curse, she did not throw anything or press the nurse's call button. But for the first time in years, Zainab cried, deep, silent tears that rolled down her face and onto the hospital gown in dark circles. She was not crying for Jelani, she was not crying for the marriage, she was crying for Nell, for the hands that picked cotton, for the woman who ironed church clothes on Saturday night and taped scripture to mirrors and saved coins in coffee tins, for the pearls that had survived slavery and poverty and time itself, only to be stolen from a nightstand by a woman who had never earned the right to touch them. She let the tears fall for exactly 5 minutes. Then she wiped her face with the back of her hand. She reached for her phone on the bedside tray. She dialed Cole's number, and when he answered, she said 2 words that carried the weight of 12 years of silence. "It's time." 1 week after the rooftop party, a heavy envelope arrived at Jelani's office. Thick cream cardstock, embossed gold lettering. It was an invitation to the Medbridge Health System's annual gala, a black-tie event unveiling a $2 billion AI-driven medical initiative that had been covered in every major business publication for weeks. The event was being held at Medbridge headquarters, a gleaming glass tower in downtown Baltimore that Jelani had driven past 100 times on his way to work, without ever once wondering who built it or who owned it. He showed the invitation to Tiffany, who nearly lost her composure. "This is where the real money is," she said, eyes wide, already mentally selecting her outfit. "We need to be seen in that room. This is the kind of crowd where lives change overnight." Lorraine insisted on attending as well. She wore her best church hat, a new brooch she bought on credit, and the expression of a woman who believed she deserved to be in any room she walked into. They arrived to a scene that made the rooftop party look like a backyard gathering. The gala hall was vast and luminous. Crystal chandeliers hung from 40-foot ceilings. Screens the size of billboards lined every wall. Cycling through Medbridge's global impact. Hospitals built in underserved communities. Mortality rates reduced. Rural clinics connected to world-class specialists for the first time. A string quartet played near the entrance. Servers in white gloves carried champagne on silver trays. Politicians mingled with Fortune 500 executives. Journalists set up cameras in the press section. This was not a party. This was a coronation. Jelani straightened his tie and tried to look like he belonged. Tiffany clutched his arm and scanned the room with the radar of a woman looking for someone richer. Lorraine settled into a front-row seat and began nodding at strangers as if the CEO had personally placed her name on the list. The lights dimmed. A hush rolled across the room like a wave. A host stepped to the stage, a tall, distinguished man in a charcoal suit with silver at his temples. He welcomed the crowd, then began speaking about the founder of Medbridge. He used the word visionary. He used the word revolutionary. He described a woman who had built her first prototype from a kitchen table, who had filed patents from a hospital bed, who had grown a single software license into a $72 billion empire while facing obstacles that would have crushed most people into dust. Then he said something that made Jelani stop mid-sip and feel the blood drain from his face. A woman who built all of this while the world overlooked her. A side door opened. The spotlight shifted to the left of the stage, and Zainab wheeled herself into the light. She wore a simple black dress. No diamonds, no gold, no ornament except one thing, her grandmother's pearl necklace, resting against her collarbone exactly where it belonged. Cole had recovered the pearls from Tiffany's apartment 2 days earlier while Tiffany was at the salon, walking in with a key Zainab's security team had obtained and walking out with 4 generations of history in a velvet pouch. Zainab's hair was pulled back from her face. Her posture was straight in her chair. Her expression carried no anger, no bitterness, no hunger for revenge. She looked like a woman who had already won everything and was simply arriving to let the world know. Jelani's champagne glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the marble floor. The sound cut through the room like a crack of thunder. Every head turned toward the noise, then turned back to the stage. Tiffany grabbed his arm so hard her nails left half moon marks in his skin. Lorraine's mouth opened, but nothing came out. No words, no breath, no excuse. She gripped the back of her chair like the floor itself was tilting beneath her. Zainab reached center stage. She adjusted the microphone. She looked out over the audience. 500 faces, cameras rolling, the medical and technology establishment of an entire nation watching in real time. And she began to speak. Her voice was low, calm, steady as the heartbeat on a monitor. She did not shout. She did not cry. She did not perform. She spoke the way Nell used to speak, with the kind of quiet authority that makes silence louder than any scream could ever be. She told her story from the beginning, the car accident at 24, the wheelchair, the diagnosis that split her life into before and after, the nights she spent alone on a cold bathroom floor because the man who stood before God and vowed to love her in sickness and in health could not be bothered to answer his phone. She told them about the software coded at a kitchen table while her husband complained about the cable bill, about the patents filed from a hospital bed between rounds of physical therapy, about the company she grew from nothing into everything, while the man sleeping in the next room told his friends she was doing nothing on her laptop all day. She told them about the rooftop party, about the 300 guests, about the man who wheeled her empty wheelchair onto a stage and used it as a theatrical prop to perform grief he did not feel, about the mistress who wore her dead grandmother's pearls while dancing on a rooftop 6 floors above the hospital where Zainab was recovering from spinal surgery, about the mother-in-law who stole those pearls from a nightstand while her daughter-in-law was sedated and connected to machines. The screens behind her changed. Property deeds appeared, holding company registrations, the building deed for the rooftop venue, owner Medbridge Health Systems, the hospital ownership documents, and then the security camera footage from the rooftop party began to play on every screen. There was Jelani rolling the wheelchair into the spotlight. There was Tiffany receiving the pearls, twirling for the crowd. There was Lorraine leaning in to whisper about the crippled girl. Every frame, every stolen kiss, every champagne toast to a lie played for 500 gasping people and every camera in the room. The silence that followed was not the polite silence of an audience waiting for what comes next. It was the silence of 500 people confronting something they could not look away from. Some covered their mouths. Some shook their heads. A woman in the 3rd row cried openly into her napkin. Zainab looked toward where Jelani sat frozen, his face the color of ash, his hands gripping his knees like he was trying to hold himself together. She did not point. She did not raise her voice. She said, "You threw a birthday party for your mistress in a building I built. You celebrated your freedom 6 floors above the hospital I founded. You used my wheelchair as a stage prop while I was recovering from surgery in my own hospital." She paused and let the silence do its work. "You never once asked what I was working on. Not once in 12 years. She turned to where Tiffany sat, trembling, mascara beginning to streak. "You wanted to be queen for one night. I have been building a kingdom for a decade." She looked at Lorraine, who had shrunk so deep into her chair She might as well have been trying to disappear into the upholstery. You took my grandmother's pearls off my nightstand while I was connected to machines. I want you to carry that memory for the rest of your life. Then she looked at Jelani one final time. A long, still, bottomless moment passed between them. The room held its breath, and Zainab said, in a voice so quiet the microphone barely caught it, "That is not betrayal, Jelani. That is blindness, and I am done being invisible." 500 people rose to their feet. The applause was not polite. It was thunderous and raw and almost furious in its admiration. Cameras flashed in waves, journalists scrambled for their phones. But Zainab did not smile, she did not wave, she did not linger. She simply turned her wheelchair and rolled off that stage with the same quiet dignity she had carried through 12 years of silence. Cole was waiting at the side door with a glass of water and a look that said everything words could not. She took one sip, set it down, said, "Take me home." The fallout came fast, and it came without mercy, the way consequences always do when they have been waiting in line for too long. Within 48 hours, the gala footage had gone viral. Every major news outlet and social media platform ran the story on repeat. The clips of Jelani rolling the wheelchair onto the stage, of Lorraine whispering her poison, of Tiffany parading in stolen pearls, they played on an endless loop like a film no one could stop watching. Comment sections flooded with outrage. Hashtags trended for days. Podcasts dedicated entire episodes. Jelani's face became the universal symbol of a man who had fumbled the most valuable thing in his life and did not even know he was holding it. His marketing firm terminated him within the week. Medbridge was their largest client, and the man who had publicly humiliated the founder's wife could not sit in the same building where her contracts were signed. He applied to 14 companies in the first month. Not a single callback. His name had become a cautionary tale, a meme shared with the caption, "Don't be this man." Recruiters Googled him, saw the footage, and closed the tab. Tiffany disappeared before the wreckage even finished falling. The morning after the gala, Jelani drove to her apartment expecting comfort. He found the door unlocked and the apartment hollow, closets empty, bathroom stripped clean, no note, no voicemail. She had looked at the math, Zainab's billions versus Jelani's nothing, and made her decision before sunrise. He called her number, disconnected, searched her social media, every account deleted. Tiffany had never loved Jelani. She had loved the illusion of what he could provide. And when that illusion shattered on a gala floor, alongside a champagne glass, she vanished like smoke through a screen door. Lorraine's collapse was slower but cut deeper. The hospital security footage of her stealing the pearls, her hand reaching into the drawer, her eyes checking the door, her fingers closing around the necklace like a thief in a sanctuary, was leaked online. It spread through group chats and church networks like fire through dry wood. Her own congregation asked her to step back from Sunday service, not with a letter, just with silence, empty seats around her, eyes that looked through her. Her sister called one final time and said, "You stole from a woman lying in a hospital bed, Lorraine. You stole from a dead woman's memory. I don't have a sister who does that." Lorraine sat alone in her living room, surrounded by framed photographs of a son who no longer called and a life that had collapsed because she could not find it in her heart to love a woman in a wheelchair. Jelani tried everything to reach Zainab. Phone calls went to a recording. Texts bounced back undelivered. He drove to the hospital 3 times and was met each time by security officers wearing Medbridge badges who escorted him to the parking lot with professional calm and zero sympathy. He sat in his car for hours, staring at the glass tower his wife had built. He wrote letters, long, handwritten, desperate letters full of apologies that arrived 12 years too late. He said he was sorry. He said he did not know. He said he wished he had asked. But wishing is what people do when doing would have cost them nothing, and they still chose not to. The divorce papers arrived on a quiet Wednesday afternoon. Simple, clean, precise. Zainab asked for nothing from him. Not a dollar, not an asset, not a single material thing, because she had never needed anything Jelani had. The papers were not punishment, they were release. They were a door being opened for both of them. Jelani signed them at a folding table in a studio apartment, with thin walls and a window that faced a dumpster. He set the pen down, looked at his own name on the page, and finally understood the full weight of what he had lost by never once asking what she was building. Months passed, and the noise faded the way all noise eventually does. The headlines moved on, the hashtags stopped trending, the think pieces gathered digital dust. The world found new stories to consume and new villains to dissect. But Zainab had never been interested in the world's attention. She had spent her entire adult life avoiding it. She had only ever wanted one thing: for the truth to breathe. And now it had. She returned to Annapolis, to the brick house, to Nell's house. She had it fully restored, the creaking porch repaired, the kitchen repainted in the same butter yellow Nell had chosen 30 years ago, the garden replanted with the same roses Nell used to water on Sunday mornings before church, while humming hymns she never finished. Everything else stayed exactly the same. The scripture on the bathroom mirror, the crocheted blanket draped over the couch, the faint smell of cinnamon that seemed to live inside the walls like a ghost that refused to leave. Zainab wheeled through those rooms slowly, running her fingers along countertops, pausing at the window where Nell used to stand watching the sun go down. She opened the side pouch on her wheelchair and took out the letter one more time. The paper was soft now, worn thin at the creases, held together by habit and love. The handwriting still blue, still steady despite the years. When the storm passes, you'll still be standing, even if you're sitting down. She folded it carefully along its familiar lines and placed it back in the pouch. Then she wheeled herself out to the garden. The sun was setting over Annapolis, painting the sky in shades of deep amber and quiet violet and the kind of gold that does not need a rooftop to shine. She closed her eyes, felt the warmth settle on her face, breathed in the roses and the evening air and the memory of a woman who had given her everything that mattered. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt no weight on her chest, no tightness behind her eyes, no phantom ache in her legs or her heart, just peace. The kind of peace that does not come from winning or from revenge, or from proving anything to anyone. The kind of peace that comes simply from being free. She launched the Nell Foundation that spring, a nationwide nonprofit dedicated to funding healthcare access and technology training for disabled women of color. MedBridge expanded into 12 new cities across the country. The AI medical initiative she unveiled at the gala began transforming rural healthcare in ways that would save thousands of lives over the coming decade. But those accomplishments, as enormous and world-changing as they were not what healed Zainab. What healed her was simpler than any algorithm she had ever written. It was the garden, the brick house, the letter, the pearls sitting warm against her collarbone, the knowledge that she had survived not by striking back, but by building forward, one quiet line of code at a time. The final image is this: Zainab in her grandmother's garden, pearls resting where they always belonged, sunset painting her face in gold, hands folded in her lap, sitting in the wheelchair that the world once pitied and that her husband once used as a stage prop, but that she had turned into a throne. She was not standing. She did not need to stand. She was something far greater than standing, and somewhere across the city in a studio apartment with thin walls and a window that faced nothing worth looking at, Jelani sat at an empty table in an empty room, staring at the space where a life used to be, finally understanding the price of never asking the woman he married. And remember, never mistake someone's silence for weakness. Never mistake someone's patience for surrender, because sometimes the person sitting down is the one holding everything up.